And welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a very special guest. Kevin Wayne Johnson is here with us. And this man has had an truly incredible career from leadership development to author to working in the government, in the DoD. I mean, this guy has experience and life lessons that are I'm just so excited to get into. So I'm not going to delay it any farther. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, Brian, thank you so much, and I appreciate the great work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we try around here. So with obviously getting into the leadership and development, I saw that you are certified under John Maxwell.
hmm
And I was wondering how you came to gravitate towards him and leadership and just how that kind of started to develop for you.
Yeah, well, in our walks of life, Brian, we're often intrigued is always a good descriptor by certain men and women based upon how they present themselves, how they talk, how they influence, sometimes how well they're groomed, and how they take command of the subject matter that they're speaking about. And when you take a look at my background, you mentioned in part, you mentioned being an author, you mentioned having worked for the federal government for 34 years. I'm a very visionary type guy. So as I was thinking about wrapping up my government career, I was already sort of putting steps in place in terms of what I wanted to do next because I enjoy working because my work is really involved with serving people, and that's part of who I am. One of my core values is serving people. And so having watched and read and listened to John Maxwell for a good number of years, a couple of decades at least, it was a combination of the fact that he was a young pastor. In his 20s, he led a church in Indiana at that time was one of the fastest growing churches. He stepped away in his 20s to move into the leadership development space. And that's why he's written so many books, sold over 25 million, and began on this journey of training men and women, leaders across the board in a lot of different countries around the world. And I was gravitated toward that because I knew that's what I wanted to do next. Found out about his program, and I compared it to all of the other programs out there because there are a ton. But because it's faith based and because he serves the local church as a pastor and he has a brilliant business mind, is really what solidified the deal for me because my background is very, very similar. 34 years with the federal government. I did work in corporate America very briefly, but not very long. My wife is a career corporate America person. And I have a background in ministry, serving the local church as a deacon, as an associate pastor, and as a senior pastor. So it was very, very attractive to me. I got involved. We have two live certification training programs every year in the month of March and in the month of August down in Orlando, Florida, where we get together and we walk through with thousands of people how to get certified as a speaker, as a trainer, as a mentor, and a coach. And so I've been actively involved and actively engaged ever since. So that's why I selected that program over all of the other ones that are available because it has that faith-based component and we have a very similar background.
Yeah, you saw somebody that was walking the path that you wanted to walk or had already started to walk and said, huh, this guy's doing it. He's doing it in a way that resonates with me and my
hmm
values. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to watch what he's
Absolutely.
doing.
Yeah. But even more than that, Brian, putting a plan of action together, because we all have goals, dreams, and aspirations, but without that written action plan to make it come to bear, there's a strong possibility that it might not happen. So, again, I started this process 5 years prior to retirement so that once I did officially retire, I could step right into it and maintain that momentum. So it was a great choice.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word process. And I know that that is one of the laws that John talks about is a law of process or having a process in place. Um,
Hmm.
how how important is that? And if somebody doesn't actually know what the first step is in order to take them towards their goals, how do you go about defining that first step?
Yeah. So I tell everybody, and I'll share this with you, Brian, and all of your listeners. The first step to anything is to take the first step. Even if you're afraid, even if you don't know, because until you take that first step, you'll never finish. And so I always tell people that, if you're looking for a job, then that is your job. Your job is looking for a job, and you should be out there 6, 7 hours a day, either online or in person, knocking on doors. And that's what you do. So that's really what the process is. The process is finding out exactly what it is that you want to do and then taking the steps toward meeting that particular goal. It's like any preparation that we go through. There's a reason that we go to elementary school and then middle school and then high school. Everything is a building block upon its next step. We encourage everyone to continue your education beyond high school, but not everybody does. But at least you have been through the process of understanding the importance of education. And if you choose to now go to the next step, and that is to college and perhaps on to your master's and perhaps on to your doctorate, with each of these different areas, in order to build upon the next one, you have to take that first step. And so that's really what the process is all about, sort of understanding what the desired outcome is and then what steps we will take to get there. And we all are on different roads, we have different journeys, we're navigated in slightly different ways, but everything begins with taking the first step. Even if you're afraid and even if you're not quite sure what to do, go ahead and take that first step anyway.
Yeah, and I think that second point that you made, not quite sure what to do, is probably the most important of that aspect, aside from just getting started.
Hmm.
Because people have this idea that gets caught in their head about perfection or, oh, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I
Hmm.
take the wrong path in order to get to where my goal is? Well, so so what? So you
Right.
took the wrong path. Well, now you know. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean you failed anything. You can just learn from it and keep going, you know?
Absolutely. That's the key. That's the key. Just learn from it. And like I always tell people, keep pressing forward.
Absolutely. And so touching back on the topic of leadership and into the law of process, I've got a question for you. The last podcast interview that I did, we touched upon leadership and we also touched on integrity. Now,
Hmm.
I'm wondering, is there a correlation between having a process and integrity when it comes to wanting to be a leader?
I would say yes. You have to remember, and this is what's really, really important for all leaders. More people than not are watching what we do and what actions we take, more so than the words we speak. And that's where the integrity piece comes in. And that's where the influence comes in to get people to follow, to get people to participate, to get people to contribute. When they see over time our actions are consistent and they're applicable to what we may be asking others to do, now we're on our way to really leading people. And that's embedded into really what integrity is all about. When people see over time your consistency with being where you say you're going to be, doing what you say you're going to do, adding value in a particular way, following up and following through, when they see you do that consistently on a regular basis, you are now in their eyes a man and woman of integrity, and there's a much higher probability that people are going to follow you. And that's really, really key. So many of us think that leadership has to do with what we know and being a subject matter expert and bringing our acumen to bear. And all of that is true. We get credibility when you do show up and you demonstrate that you really do know your stuff, and that's good. But what's really, really in the minds and in the hearts of people that are looking for great leaders to follow is the spirit of helping them and valuing them and honoring them and developing them and ultimately treating them not just as workers, but as people. And
Mm.
all of that is tied into integrity, and all of it is a process. A lot of this that we talk about, we don't get in school. You find out afterwards. That's one of the reasons why I got connected with the Maxwell leadership team. What I've learned about leadership post education has been tremendous. And that's what we share with people in the marketplace as we work with governments and corporations and churches and nonprofits, and then also academic institutions.
Yeah, very, very valid points. And you touched on something. You said you want to show the people that you're stepping forward to lead, that you value them, that you're
Mhm.
there to serve them. And there's something that happens, or at least it's said that it happens when you start stepping forward as a leader and putting yourself out there. That, and I can't. I'm going to paraphrase here, but at first they mock you, then they hate you, then they fall in line and believe you. It's something
Mhm.
like that. If you know what I'm talking about, that whole
Yeah,
step process, right?
exactly.
So my curiosity is, have you seen that play out with the people that you've coached? And if so, um, how do you how do you steal inside of that person that you're coaching? Like, no, you're on the right path. You're doing the right things. How do you steal that in them? Because it's got to shake them up when they start seeing that pushback, from friends, family, close coworkers, things like that.
Well, I have to. I'll share this with you, and I'll put it in this context. I always let people know right up front whether they're an aspiring leader or a seasoned leader or somewhere in between on the spectrum. And I phrase it like a question because I want them to think about it. I like to ask thought-provoking, open-ended questions. And so whenever I'm in front of a leader, one-on-one or in a group, I ask the question, what do you think is the hardest part of being a leader? Or what is the most difficult aspect of leadership in your own mind, in your own way, in your thoughts? And most people pause and they think about it because they don't have an answer right off because they don't really expect to get that type of a question.
It's a good question. I had an
It
answer
is.
right away.
I know you do. I know you do, Brian. And some people struggle and some people come right out with it. But I tell them, and then we unpack it. I tell them the hardest part, the most challenging aspect of leadership is people. Plain and simple. Just one word, people. Because people are all over the place in terms of their thoughts, what's going on in their mind, their private agendas, their personality, how they solve problems, how they make decisions, their conflict management style. You have so many different dynamics at play in every single person that you're leading. And so that's what makes it so challenging. That's what makes it so difficult. So the way that we kind of break it down and help leaders to better understand what they're getting into above and beyond what they know and their subject matter expertise is we just have to really kind of take time to do two things. We have to open ourselves up and allow people that we're leading to get to know us. And then we, as the leader, have to take the time to get to know them. And when that dynamic takes place, whatever the issue is that anybody is dealing with, over time, you're going to build that rapport and you're going to establish a good relationship. And that's going to lead to trust. And it goes back to how we started this conversation. It's a process because everybody's different. And that's what makes it so fascinating. That's why I smile so much when I talk about leadership because there's so many different dynamics and so many different components. And the training aspect, the leadership development, goes hand in hand with the coaching aspect. Because see, the coaching now helps individuals see the world through their lens, but from a different perspective, from the perspective of the people that we're leading. And that's why coaching is so powerful and it's so important. as it relates to the leadership development training, so that we can help the totality of the person, that is the leader, to understand the totality of the people that they're leading. And so it's a really interesting and dynamic conversation when we get a chance to unpack it and have a conversation and dialogue about it. And people are looking, their eyes are wide open. They're saying, "Oh, I never thought about that." And I said, that's exactly why we're having the conversation.
Mhm. Perfect. And there, man, there is so much that I want to touch on with that. But first, I want to go into a lot of my own connections are in the coaching space. Speaking of coaches, because
Hmm.
it's an exploding industry, as I'm sure you're well aware.
Yeah.
Um, and online is the way that most people are making these connections and starting this journey to become a coach, become a leader. So what I was wondering is, how important is it to take your broad outreach, like just a regular Facebook post that goes out to everybody? How important is it to take that audience and move the ones that are interested or curious into a different container in order to start that process, like you were saying about letting them really get to know you and you get to know them?
Yeah, that's a good one, Brian, because we have to have a varied approach, VARIED. We have to be varied and think about the audience that we're reaching. The audience is not monolithic. So that means we can't use a monolithic approach to try to move people. I'm using your words, to move people. We have to remember a lot of people are visual. So we have to use visual graphics and sometimes animation when we're reaching that particular group. Other people are very comfortable with just words. So we can just kind of state what it is we have to say. Other people, we have to kind of unpack it. We have to give examples. So I'll make a statement. I'll throw out a definition, if you would, on leadership in terms of how Kevin Wayne Johnson sees it, and then under that I'll say, for example, ABC company just hired a brand new manager. This manager doesn't have any expertise in terms of the textile industry, but this particular manager does have expertise in leading people. And from your perspective, what are the first three things that this new manager should do? So I want them thinking he may not have the textile industry experience, but he has leadership experience with leading people coming into this new industry. What are the top three things that you think that he should do? And that engages people, and that might move them into a different compartment. So it's a matter of recognizing and acknowledging the audience, knowing that they're not monolithic, and we have to use different approaches to reach different people. And that's something that in many circles we miss, and then we wonder why some people don't get what it is that we've asked them to do, because we haven't asked them to do it in their language, how they're used to receiving information. And so
Yes.
even when it comes to the social media aspect, in terms of just heightening the level of awareness and educating people, that's what I use social media for, just to educate people. I just sent out a post the other day. I'm a big fan of literacy, and people probably don't know, but right here in America, how many millions of Americans are way below the literacy rate when it comes to being able to read. And so I wrote an article about it, put it out there on LinkedIn, and get some engagement. It's all about heightening the level of awareness and educating people around a topic that they may not know, to engage them and get them to have a conversation back. So, and we use that same approach in terms of interactive leadership training, giving these examples, having people talk about their core values, giving scenarios as it relates to how a person is leading, how do you think they should be leading, etc., to get that engagement, to get the conversation going, and to get the discussion going, because that's where the great learning really takes place.
Yeah, and you touched on something again. There's just so many roads we can go down. First off, I kind of want to play along with that first example that you said of the leader going into the textile industry. And what do you think his first three steps should be. So, to be perfectly honest, I only came up with two.
Hmm.
And it's you want to get in front of these people and introduce yourself, tell them your story,
Hmm.
and then give them the opportunity to tell you their story to
Hmm.
create that personal connection, personal dynamic. And the next thing that I think ought to be done is once you've got that personal dynamic started, then you ask them, hey, what's going right here? And what is going wrong? Or what can be improved?
Hmm.
And you get their real world experience and feedback, and just to let them know again that you're listening and that you
Hmm.
care. So those would be my first two, but I'm struggling to come up with a third, and I'm wondering if you can finish that out for me.
Well, actually, Brian, I heard four, right?
Oh, did
I
you
heard
now?
four.
Oh,
I heard
all right.
four because you mentioned initially, okay, so tell me about yourself, and I'll tell you something about me. That's two. And then as it relates to what's working well and what are some areas that can be improved, that's actually four. Now, here's the fifth. If you want to think of it as two, that's fine. But here's a fifth or a third. And that is now that you've established the conversation, and even though you're still working on building the personal relationships with the team, but at least you started the dialogue and the conversation, it's okay for leaders to be authentic and to be genuine and to be a little bit vulnerable. It's not a weakness to say, hey, I'm coming in new to this industry. Um, what is it that we can do together to advance the work that's already taken place? We,
We.
us, our, not I'm the boss, I'm in charge, and this is what I'm going to do. No, no,
Right.
no, that won't work. But when we start using that language right up front, us, our, we, together, now you got people's attention. And that's a good way to kind of start this relationship, and to build on it because it's already started. We kicked off the conversation. I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me. Now we know each other on the surface, nothing really deep. But over time, I've opened the door to let you know that I'm the type of leader that's open and receptive to have these types of conversations. This is the type of leadership style that I'm going to bring. I'm a collaborator and I like to do things in partnership. I don't believe in being autocratic and dictate. I prefer to ask. That's just my style. And I believe that we're going to work together very, very well. All that's taken place in the very beginning. And then over time, when they see that consistency and they see you and I walk the talk, now we have that integrity piece that we talked about earlier and the trust. And people now, they know that they have a leader on board that we can trust that has a high degree of character and integrity. And now we're on our way to working well together. It's perfectly okay that I'm new to this area. That's happened throughout my entire career where I was assigned to lead a team, to lead an organization that I was not familiar with, but I do know how to lead people. I know how to motivate and influence people, but I really wasn't up to snuff on this particular area. And I'm going to need the entire team, guess what, to help me as much as I will be helping you and developing you. It's a collaboration. We're in this together.
Right. And just one more point on the opening the conversation. You mentioned the word vulnerable or
Hmm.
vulnerability. When people hear that word, and I'm glad that you said it, it's not a weakness.
Right.
That's actually more of a strength to be able to do that. But typically, when you hear that word, especially if you're not used to being that way, you think you might think that you're supposed to open your soul and tell people about your childhood upbringing and all the trauma that went on there. And I don't, you're shaking your head no. So I think you agree with me on this that where you start is I guess you would say more surface level vulnerability as it relates to, like you said, coming into a new organization. Would that would you agree with me on?
Yeah, I think you're on point in what you just articulated. And you do have to keep in mind now, some people on the team or maybe some colleagues and peers, or maybe even a boss, um, will perceive it as being a weakness.
Mm.
But we have to stand up and let people know that no, I'm not a doormat. That's just my leadership style. And if someone tries to take advantage of it because they think it's a weakness, then now that's a conversation one on one behind closed doors. So you can set the record straight. I've had to do that as well because, again, like I said, my leadership style is one of being a collaborator. When I need to make a decision in a vacuum, I can. Like if I don't have enough time to really chat with other people about it, I get a directive from the director or from the commissioner or from the administrator directly to me saying, Kevin, I need a decision in 90 minutes. What should I do? Well, in that case, then I'm in the position because I need to make a decision and give some good counsel and some good advice. But when I can bring the team in and have a conversation about it, that's more of my style. But because I like to have conversations with people and get to know them, because I understand human behavior, people that are walking around with issues that are unresolved, they tend to internalize it. But if they have a leader that at some point they can talk to about it, even though we're not counselors and we're not therapists, we can help that person to be on their way to healing from that particular issue. And I believe because we spend so much time together in the workforce, that's part of our responsibility. No, I'm not a trained psychologist or therapist or counselor. I get it, but I am your supervisor. I'm your leader. I give a care that you're here, and anything you want to talk to me about in confidence, feel free to do so. And that's part of healing for a lot of people who don't have any other outlets because we spend so much time at work. So I help leaders to understand that dynamic as well. That's part of human behavior that we miss, to expect people to just put their head down and work, 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 and not have conversations with their colleagues, and not be able to demonstrate some kindness to their customers and stakeholders, and not get to know their coworkers and their peers. We're doing them a disservice as people, I believe. And this is more than just what we know, but it's our ability to be able to navigate the hallways of the workplace to really help people when it's all said and done to get to the next level, to tap into their potential, and ultimately feel good about what they're doing. We spend a lot of time. 40 hours is a big chunk in anyone's week. Not to mention the couple of hours it takes to prepare to get to work, and the couple of hours that it might take to get back home from work. And we're just asking people who are leaders and aspiring leaders to think a little bit more about that, and how significant you can be in making a positive impact in the lives of others. It's an awesome responsibility to be entrusted to lead people. It is an awesome responsibility. Let's not abuse it, and let's not misuse it.
Yeah. And let's not just scratch the surface on how to get it done. A lot
Hmm.
of what you said invoked imagery in my mind of school, like back in middle school, grade school, and the expectation that some people have as a leader, that you just expect people to put their head down and work, or
Hmm.
put their head down and read the book or take the notes and then take the test. Don't ask too many questions because that's not on the test. I think that's where a lot of that mentality comes from. And I know you value education so much. What, and this may be like way off tangent, but what's going on with our education system right now? Like we are not turning out independent, deep thinking people. And I understand not everybody's going to be that, but you can at least foster somebody to take a farther step down that road than they would if they just did what they need to do just to pass a test. What's
Hmm.
what's going on with our education system right now?
Yeah, it's a mystery to me, Brian, as it is probably to most Americans, as to why, as a nation, we don't invest more in our teachers. When I look back over my life, when it comes to the top five most important people in my life, not including my parents, there's a teacher or two that's in that top five. because of how they deposited in my life. So I think it starts there, quite frankly. I think it starts there in terms of somehow, some way, our nation making a more concerted investment into our school teachers from pre-K to K to elementary, middle, and high school. I think we're doing okay at the college level. I'm a visiting professor at my alma mater, Virginia Commonwealth University. So I have an opportunity to engage with the undergraduate students a lot, and they seem to be well on their way and kind of understanding what life is all about, having some desire, having energy, having drive. At the School of Business is where I operate. But at the lower levels, you're absolutely right, because I know of some who have to spend their own money to procure supplies that are needed for the classroom. And it shouldn't be that way. So what happens is if you have demoralized teachers who really aren't motivated and able to give it their best, then they can't pass it on to the students. And if it's not being passed on to the students and they don't see it and they're not living it, then we get a product that's less than it should be. Things have really changed over these last several decades as it relates to how the Department of Education and the federal government overall takes care of school teachers. We just don't put a priority on it. So that has a lot to do with it. I think that's kind of the roots of why we see fewer and fewer students actually excel. Now, on the other hand, there's still quite a few of them that are excelling that I read about on a regular basis. That you don't necessarily read about it or see it in the news, either TV or on newspapers, but they're definitely out there, but not so much in the numbers as it used to be. So that's really a good observation. But my response would be let's make more of an investment, not just financial, but you know, uh, whatever type of investment you can think of that's needed as it relates to our teachers would be, I believe, a good step forward.
Yeah. My mind goes to the investment being in not just financial, but in the environment as well.
Hmm.
And the environment of learning is what I'm talking about, not like the environment of the earth, but the environment of learning. And I think this is why we're seeing so many private schools and charter schools that are popping up because they're not, they're able to put that focus in and hire, these great educators in order to
Hmm.
help the kids. And they're not just, turning out automatons, at a eighth grade
And
reading level in high school.
yeah, and homeschooling as well is increasing.
And homeschool. Yes, yes,
Yep,
very valid point. Very valid
absolutely.
point.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's a good direction to be heading in?
Well, what happens is that parents across the board look at what's taking place and they're choosing alternatives. It's no different than in any other walk of life. If you take a look at what's happening and you don't like what you see, then you look at the alternatives. And if the alternatives don't exist, you create them. That's what makes America so beautiful. And so that's why you see a spike in all of these different areas. You mentioned private school, you mentioned charter schools, but what comes to mind, because I just recently had a conversation about it, is homeschooling across the board, across cultures, across ethnicities, across genders. Parents are kind of taking things in their own hands to say, there's got to be a better way. So here's my alternative, and this is what we're going to do. So that has a lot to do, quite frankly, with anything, any walk of life, when we don't see something that's working necessarily well, or perhaps to our advantage, or based on the resources that has been provided, we choose an alternate resource, and that's exactly what's happening as it relates to the education system.
So speaking of an alternate resource and maybe the student not finding what they're needing in a particular scenario, I'm curious, with you being tied into the college community and being a visiting professor, especially in the School of Business, my kind of hypothesis is eventually that we are not going to have schools, that
Hmm.
all of our children, they might show up to a school because maybe people will still have to go to work, and they'll still be needed a place to go for the children. But it will not look like what it looks like right now, as in the teacher is actually going to be an AI that can look at the student and their learning capacity, their learning style, their communication style, and be able to perfectly tailor the lesson to that particular student's needs. Is that, am I like way out of left field, or what do you think about that?
Well, given my limited knowledge of AI to date, I wouldn't put it past them. I've listened to a couple of lectures and I've read just a little bit on the topic. And of course, I get emails like all day, every day on AI. Have you considered this? What do you think about that? How about this? I don't know enough about it yet, Brian, to make an intelligent opinion. But when you think about the advancements of technology in terms of where we've come these last couple of decades, I wouldn't put it past the realm of possibilities. I mean, I just don't know. I'm still learning about it, but if I can compare it to how we have seen technology advance and scale and modify and revise our lifestyle, I mean, who would have known 20 years ago that everything that we need would be in the palm of our hand
Right.
because of technology? I mean, everything from the quality of watching a movie to watching live TV to responding to your voicemail to scanning the internet, sending emails, using it as a navigator in your car to go from A to B, your calendar. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I don't want to take up the whole program, but wow, who would have thought that 20 years ago? So 5, 10, 15 years from now, in terms of AI sort of just coming on the scene, who knows? It's the realm of possibilities are out there.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And we'll just kind of leave it there, because I'll just keep that hypothesis in the back of my head and just watch how time rolls out.
Yeah.
Going back to the education and the eighth grade leaving reading levels, and tying it back into entrepreneurship. Um, Me being an entrepreneur and in this space, I've heard from multiple people over and over again that you don't want to speak when you're out there trying to communicate your message. You don't want to speak it in a way that it's basically any higher than an eighth grade reading level, because
Hmm.
otherwise people just won't grasp it. They won't be able to get it and hold on, and then maybe take that next step to
Hmm.
following you, getting on your email list, whatever it is. Is that, and is this a function of the educational level, like the foundational educational level that's out there in the United States right now, or is it more a function of psychology and the brain's wanting to grasp things quickly?
Yeah, as it relates to the education system, I don't think there's a parallel there because you can go back 25, 30 years. So that's 3 decades. And in the School of Journalism, on the campus of any institution of higher learning, you'll discover that those journalism students are taught to report as news anchors, as reporters in the field, to report your stories at the 8th grade level. It's been that way for years because we have so many people in America who don't have the education level that many others have. But guess what? They watch the news. They want to capture that story. It's no different than when you read your newspaper. Those journalists that write their news stories in the newspaper in print, the simplicity of the words that they use so that they would resonate with everyone. The news anchor that's sitting behind the desk is reading the teleprompter. The words that the director gives, they're stated such that they can be delivered at the 8th grade level because they want everyone out there that's watching and listening to be able to discern and not have to try to get into the deep, long 12 syllable words that everybody doesn't understand.
Yep. I've definitely read
So
some stories that have those words in them, and I just look at them like, I have
What?
no idea what that means. Like, I'm gonna have to
Exactly.
Google that.
Yeah.
Like,
But even today, Brian, as we speak, in the School of Journalism, that's how they train and teach the students that you're going to have to be able to deliver it and articulate it at an eighth grade level, so that that wide audience out there is going to be able to understand it.
now, are they training them to talk all the same way as well? Like they get on camera, it's like, or on the radio, this is da 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 at WKRX News here in Cincinnati. And like,
Well,
come on, dude, you don't talk like that, really.
yeah, they don't really talk like that, but there is a psychology though, and as it relates to human behavior, to getting people's attention right up front. I'll tell you a quick story, and it ties into what we're doing, and it ties into leadership. This is back in the 50s when Barry Gordy founded Motown Records in Detroit. And when you listen to his story about how he led as the CEO and president, and how he thought about bringing in different artists and different groups to sing music to compete with the other recording companies back in the day, he would always remind us that it's in those first 3, 4, 5 seconds of a song you have to get the listener's attention. And when you go back and play some of the songs from some of the more popular groups that he signed under the Motown label, and this goes across all the different labels, you'll find that those songs that were more successful than the others were the ones that grabbed your attention right up front. And so as a disc jockey, they're trained to get our attention right up front. A lot of the movies that we go see, some of the television programs that we watch, they get our attention right up front, those first few seconds, to keep us glued to what it is that's coming next. So there's a psychology behind it, and they understand human behavior. And once they get us hooked in those first few seconds, they got us. If you don't, they lose us.
Right. Valid point. And my mind went immediately back to um, that person at that textile plant standing
Hmm.
on that stage. What does he say?
Hmm.
What does he say in those first 5 to 10 seconds to get their attention and keep it,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. That's the
Yeah.
conversation that we had. So that's why taking the time to get to know them and them having the opportunity to get to know us is the starting point of developing these relationships. And then once the relationship is established, now that transitions into trust, because people have had a chance to watch and see over time to say, yep, I trust this person. So when it comes time to making a hard decision or an unfavorable decision or a quick decision, people will trust it because they know that you are a person of character and a person of integrity. And they know that because they've watched the consistency over a period of time.
So that first 5 to 10 seconds, it's the uncommonness of vulnerability
Hmm.
that gets people's attention because they're not used to it.
Absolutely, they're not. The overwhelming majority of people in the workplace just are not used to that. They're not accustomed to that. They're accustomed to being told what to do, oftentimes how to do it and when to do it. They're used to being micromanaged. There's a lot of different factors and barriers that go into that. But when you have a conversation with a lot of people across the workplace and a lot of different areas, a lot of different industries and functions, most will tell you the same thing, right? So it's the human behavior. It doesn't matter if you're new to an organization, a department, a team, an industry, as long as you know some of the basic principles and strategies around leading people, you'll be successful wherever you go.
And going back to a big picture type of idea, um, my opinion is, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts because you've been on both sides of this. My opinion is the government is not going to save this country. It's not going to dig us out of this debt, this economic, this health hole that we're in. And you're shaking your head, so I'm guessing you're agreeing with me. So that being said, my inclination is it is entrepreneurship that is going to lead us out. And I'm curious to hear your opinion on that matter.
Yeah, I totally agree, Brian. And I had a suspicion that's where you were going because that's where the innovation and that's where the creativity and that's where the courage and that's where the boldness comes from. Those of us who are entrepreneurs, and that's the space that I'm in this season of my life, now that I've retired and I've moved into this space, it's a whole different world. And we do have opportunities to be innovative and creative outside of the bounds as long as it's ethical and it's not illegal, to introduce different things into the marketplace. And that's what we do. And that's exactly how Amazon got started 3 decades ago. The Bezos was very, very brilliant. He just introduced to us in the very beginning e-commerce. That's what he did. He introduced e-commerce. We weren't
Yeah.
comfortable 30 years ago with giving our credit card information over the World
No, that
Wide
was
Web.
I remember that. That was a big deal when Amazon first came
Yeah,
out, and they were just selling books and
just
CDs,
books. Yep.
and yeah, just books. And then they got into CDs. And that's the point where my dad started paying attention because he's a big music guy.
Hmm.
And he still was like, I am not putting my credit card on the internet. And now we do it
Right.
on our phone every day, every day.
Every day. As a matter of fact, the volume of sales during the Christmas season is astronomical. But
Oh, it's ridiculous.
30 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about it. So he introduced e-commerce that takes innovation, creativity, and boldness, because you know you're going to get some backlash, and putting the necessary security measures in place. And this is where the government came alongside to help, because the Securities and Exchange Commission and some of the other government agencies that oversee and regulate this had some say. But he had some good conversations and he says, listen, I'm just going to introduce books at this time to the consumer. And then once that became popular and many, many books were being sold, which led to the closure of some brick and mortars. And then we got more comfortable with e-commerce, and now he can introduce more products, and now you can get probably just about anything you need on Amazon, and you can probably get it within 24 hours. But it took a progression, and now they're a company, they're only one of three companies based in the United States that has a total valuation that exceeds $1 trillion, yes, with a T, and it just
Yes.
started 30 years ago. So, yeah, it's not the government. The government can come alongside. They can put in the regulatory compliance and governance and oversight procedures and policies that are needed to make sure it's not illegal. In some cases, it might be immoral, but if it's not illegal, and you can continue to go forward. But it's going to take entrepreneurship. It always has, to be innovative and to be creative and bold and doing some things that had never been done. Apple has a very similar story. I mean, who would have thought? Microsoft has a story. You know, IBM refused to allow software to be integrated with their hardware at the time. They were just selling peripherals. They just the desktops and the keyboards. And you know, Bill Gates tried to negotiate with them, and they wouldn't talk to him. He said, "Okay, I'll just create my own company, and I'll sell the software." And look at him, you know. So, and that was
Yep.
1985, right? So, yeah, and those are just two technology examples, but I use technology all the time because look at how far and how fast technology has advanced. So, yeah, before that there was industrial. Before that there was agriculture. You know, who did Henry Ford think he was, coming up with a car? Horse and buggy was just fine. And what is this? And so now look at what's going on. So
Yep.
yeah,
Henry Ford was a menace to society when he first came out.
exactly.
Yep. And now everybody's on four wheels driving around. Yep.
Everybody,
It's,
absolutely.
talking about Amazon and how they got their start with books. I believe that you have a new book that has just come out or going to be releasing soon. Is that right?
Yeah, so yeah, I've been writing, Brian, for 20 years. I've been authoring books for 20 years across a lot of different categories: faith, blended families, leadership, men, finance. I could go on because I am a principal author where I write my own books, but then I also get calls from other people in the marketplace to ask me to contribute my story to their book, and it becomes an anthology. So I actually have 20 in my portfolio, and because I love to write, I have many, many more in me. But here lately, in this place and space, I'm writing primarily on the topic of leadership, and it's a series of books called Leadership with a Servant's Heart, and I put a lot of emphasis on the heart. You see on the cover, I always emphasize a red heart in addition to the title, Leadership with a Servant's Heart. And it goes in parallel with the conversation that we're having on this episode because leadership is more than just what we know. We gain a certain level of credibility when we show up in our position with our title from people that we're leading. They give us the benefit of the doubt that we know our stuff. That's how you got there. There's always some exceptions. We know some people are in their positions that they didn't earn and they really don't know their stuff, but that's the exception and not the norm. But when we're leading with the heart, in addition to what we know, this is where we show the empathy and the compassion and the care and the respect of the people that we're leading because they're worthy of that. And when those two align, when those two embrace and they come together, all of us now are on our way to being much better leaders and helping people to develop and realizing their potential and giving them the resources and the training that they need to be the best that they can be. So that in a nutshell is what this series of books are all about. First one came out just before the pandemic. Second one came out in October of 2022. I just finished a 12-month national book tour. I went to 20 cities across the United States from December 22 to December of 23. And I also went over to Kihancha, Kenya, and led some church development, leadership development, and working with some of the community leaders and entrepreneurs over in Kenya as well. I was over there for about 8 days with a group, and we'll be doing more in 2024. We'll be heading to, as a matter of fact, in a couple of days, we'll be heading to Aruba to do some work there. This summer, we'll be in Paris for the Summer Olympics. I'll be doing some things there. And then later in the year, I'll be in Botswana and South Africa doing some work there as well. Not to mention what's taking place here in the United States. So that's the latest and greatest. And you gravitate toward and you do what you enjoy. And what I enjoy, Brian, is serving people. And I enjoy serving people in this lane because I've seen what bad leaders do and I've seen what good leaders do. And I'm convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that better leaders help to make the world a much better place. And so if I can touch 1 million people over these next several years, which is my goal, then I am doing my work. That's part of my personal mission to be able to serve people in this capacity.
Well, it's a beautiful mission, Kevin, and truly I'm honored to be able to be a part of it, to be able to help you get your awareness and your word out there. So again, man, thank you for coming on. This has been an amazing conversation. And so let people know where they can follow you, find more information, where can they buy the book? Like more people need to hear what you have to say and how can they do that?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So the name of my company is the Johnson Leadership Group. And so the website is thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com. And when you go to the website, you'll see everything that you need to know to see about who we are and what we do. You'll see the team. You'll see information about the books. You'll see the calendar in terms of the places that we're going to be traveling. And you'll get a little bit of background on who we are and the work that we're doing. So all of my contact information is there as well. Kevin at thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com. I'm based in the state of Maryland. I'm just north of our nation's capital and just south of Baltimore on the East Coast in the United States. So very, very easy to reach. Look forward to hearing from your listeners and let's see how I can serve them.
Well, there you go, folks. another amazing conversation, another amazing person and entrepreneur, Kevin Wayne Johnson. Thank you again so much for coming on. If you need to get in touch with him, contact links are going to be below. So enjoy this episode, share it with your friends, anyone that needs to see this message of leadership with a servant's heart. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.